Welcome to the Explainer. I am so incredibly thrilled you're here today because, honestly, we are going to completely flip the way you look at business finance. Seriously, forget the spreadsheets for a second. I want you to picture a scene with me. It's a quiet terrace, arranged almost like a negotiation table. There are these long, deliberate pauses hanging in the air. Two colleagues, Meera and Aarav, are sitting there. Meera brings out an old, heavy brass seal. You know, the kind they used to physically mark dividend checks with in a cooperative bank. Aarav brings a packet of cinnamon-coated peanuts and a printout of a regional textile merger proposal. It feels transactional, sure, but it's not cold. And this exact terrace negotiation sets up our entire thesis for today. What if business ledgers aren't just made of numbers? What if they're actually made of human narratives? What if the decisions a company makes about its money are, at the end of the day, the absolute deepest reflections of its relationships?
Okay, let's dive into this. Today we'll be looking at dividends as dialogue, mergers, math and mood, restructuring for renewal, and finally, buyouts, takeovers, and tensions. And we are going to completely flip the traditional perspective on every single one of these. Starting with Section 1, dividends as dialogue. Not just distribution, but dialogue. We usually think of dividends as cold, calculated profit, right? But look at how financial math collides with human relationships. And this brilliantly illustrates the contrast. In business school, you learn theories like the residual theory. Basically, fund your investments first, pay dividends later. Well, when a dairy co-op actually did this to fund their cold storage, Meera noted something profound. It wasn't neglect, it was nurture. Or take the stability theory, paying a flat rate no matter what happens in the market. A publisher doing this wasn't just showing generosity, it was grounding its people. Then there's the relevance theory, which argues dividends position a firm's value. Think of a startup using high dividends to attract early investors. That wasn't just a payout, it was positioning. And notice how the irrelevance theory's human meaning is completely blank. That's because it's purely mathematical based on perfect market conditions. It completely lacks the human element that actually drives a real business. Think about how a company actually figures out a dividend. The traditional calculations look at earnings, liquidity, and taxes. Very cut and dry. But the real driver? The real driver is a conversation. Let me give you an example. When a local bakery had a highly profitable year, they didn't just cut a standard check. They offered hybrid festival bonuses to shareholders. That wasn't just cash, that was meaning. When a cooperative used a tiered payout system that rewarded long-term members over newer ones, it wasn't some strict corporate hierarchy. It was an acknowledgement of shared history. And when a school trust reinvested its surpluses directly into scholarships, well, their dividend wasn't even formally declared. Instead, it was lived out through their values. Moving on to Section 2, mergers, math and mood, how cultures collide, cohere, or collapse. When two entities combine, I promise you, it is never just about the math. It is entirely about the mood of the organizations. Take a horizontal merger between a textile firm and a dyeing unit. The transaction goal on paper was scale. But the actual transformation, it wasn't just synergy, it was stitching. Beautiful, right? When a vertical publisher acquired a digital startup, the goal was market reach, but it wasn't a hostile takeover, it was a translation of their core media into a new format. And when a dairy acquired a logistics firm to lock down its strategic moves, it wasn't just an expansion, it was embodiment. The dairy was quite literally embodying its own supply chain. Now, if you've ever studied mergers and acquisitions, these 5 standard steps are intimately familiar. Identification, valuation, negotiation, due diligence, and integration. It's rigid, it's mechanical, it looks exactly like a simple, logical checklist. But let's completely disrupt that rigid process for a second. Just throw the checklist out. As Meera puts it, deals are not just signed, they're sensed. Humanity is constantly interrupting those mechanical steps, and honestly, thank goodness for that. Let's look at what that sensing looks like in the real world. A bakery explored merging with a cafe. They went through the motions, did the joint tasting sessions and the surveys, but ultimately, they didn't merge. However, the process itself culturally wove them together, deepening their working relationship. Or take a school trust looking to acquire a learning app. During due diligence, they sensed some serious pedagogy gaps. So instead of blindly integrating, they stopped and redesigned the app first. It was a crucial pause and plan. And my absolute favorite example, a cooperative was looking at a struggling co-op. Instead of absorbing them, they chose to offer mentorship and shared procurement. They chose accompaniment. The human element completely redefines the outcome, proving the M&A process itself holds immense value, even if the deal changes completely. Section 3, restructuring for renewal. Not just repair, but renewal.
We so often assume that restructuring means something is fundamentally broken, right? It's a fix. But what if it's actually about breathing totally new life into an entity? So the crucial point is that these restructurings create entirely new dynamics rather than just moving lines around on a spreadsheet. When a textile firm spun off its design unit, it wasn't a separation or divorce. It was giving them the creative space they desperately needed. When a publisher replaced its rigid hierarchy with editorial pods, grouping an editor, designer, and marketer together, it wasn't just flattening an org chart, it was creating a new sense of flow. And a cooperative rebranding its milk packaging while keeping the exact same core values, that wasn't a cosmetic change, it was a deep, cultural one.
This brings us to a really fascinating concept: value creation. There's your traditional financial value, cost savings, revenue growth, and market access. But then there's what we call felt value. When a bakery merged with a spice vendor to create fusion masala muffins, sure, sales rose. But more importantly, the idea spread like wildfire. The true value was the memory created for their customers. When a school partnered with a theater group to create new learning modules, the value was the deep, resonant connection forged with the students. And when a cooperative decided to add a youth cohort to its board, their decision-making definitely slowed down. But it also deepened. The value wasn't in the speed, it was in the spirit.
Section 4. Buyouts, takeovers, and tensions. The high stakes of human friction. This is where corporate finance gets incredibly dramatic. Before a buyout or a major shift, you obviously have to negotiate. But in this human-centric framework, negotiation is absolutely not about leverage. It is entirely about listening. A publishing house negotiated tiered royalties based on how much a book resonated with audiences, a brilliant demonstration of trust. A cooperative facing soaring inflation didn't just squeeze its suppliers. They sat down and co-created pricing models together. That is bonding. And a school trust literally negotiated with major donors for their mentorship and time, not just their money. It's about alignment. See how mutual respect just totally transforms the friction?
Now, let's talk about leveraged buyouts, or LBOs. The textbook definition is pretty aggressive: acquiring a firm using borrowed funds, often secured against the acquired firm's own assets. It's high stakes. But as Meera brilliantly observes, LBOs are not just bold, they're burdened. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the incredible tension between the financial push and the human pushback. When a textile firm was acquired through an LBO, the immense debt pressure quickly led to really painful layoffs. That buyout was an acute human loss. But compare that to a successful bakery that flat out rejected a highly lucrative private equity buyout. They did it specifically to avoid that debt burden. They chose slower organic growth out of sheer fidelity to their original vision. Or look at a cooperative that caused an acquisition to form a joint venture instead. That was a vital moment of careful reflection chosen over forced debt-fueled growth.
And then, of course, we have takeovers. Whether they're friendly or hostile, takeovers are truly about navigating organizational tensions. A massive media conglomerate once approached a smaller publishing house with a highly generous offer. The editorial team looked at it, feared their unique culture would be diluted, and simply declined. It wasn't an act of defiance, it was an act of dignity. In another case, a cooperative faced a vicious hostile takeover attempt. The members rallied together, restructured their defenses on the fly, and successfully resisted. That wasn't just corporate war, that was pure collective will. And sometimes it actually works out beautifully. A large corporate chain offered a merger to a school trust. The trust negotiated fiercely, retained their autonomy, and together they co-created a totally new educational model. It wasn't a surrender, it was synthesis. Let's pull ourselves right back to that quiet terrace where we started. The pocket of cinnamon peanuts is nearly empty now. The heavy brass seal sits perfectly still on the notebook. It feels like a boardroom, but it's completely layered with care and humanity. Meera whispers to Aarav, summarizing absolutely everything we've just uncovered today. Dividends are not just returns, they're relationships. And deals are not just decisions, they're dialogues. As they finish up their meeting, they write a final reflection in their notebook. And I want to leave these exact same questions with you right now. Think about your own professional life, your own team, your own projects. Think about your own ledger. What do I share and why? What do I merge and how? The numbers will always be there, but the meaning behind them, that is entirely up to you. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. It's been a blast, and I'll see you next time.